Hello gamers, Matthew here from Grey Army Gaming in lovely Sweden. Welcome to our July Sci-Fi Solo Big Show. Now this is going to be the first episode, the kickoff episode of our experiment in collaborative solo role-playing. In the month of July now, we have divided up the month in this fashion that we are going to be each of us taking a 15-minute session, developing the story, and passing it on to the next person. We have no idea where this is going to go. We have no idea what kind of story is going to build and unfold, and that's what makes it so incredibly exciting. Is it is entirely in the hands of everybody who is collaborating. Now, I'm going to be starting out today with the kickoff session, but our first episode with the other players will begin on July 1st, and then every 3 days, every 72 hours, we have an upload deadline where someone should be able to upload their video, and we will put these videos in a playlist where you can follow along. If you have not yet signed up, please do feel free to contact me, greyarmygaming@gmail.com, and I can get you onto the list and slot you in for the upcoming role-playing sessions. Just something briefly here about the setting and the character before we get going. I'm going to be starting off in the Numenera world. Now, what this means is that Numenera is an interesting mix of something like high fantasy and sci-fi. The idea behind the lore is that there have been 8 generations or 8 worlds previous to the one we now find ourselves in that have built up massive civilizations, massive technologies, but these have gone extinct. And now we find ourselves in something like a medieval world with these artifacts of technology all around us. I'm going to play this game with a little bit more technology because I really want to push on the sci-fi aspect of the game and use those elements. So there's going to be a lot more sci-fi maybe than in a normal Numera game, but that is entirely appropriate. We can do whatever we want with this setting, but it's going to be sci-fi, and I love sci-fi. I think my first game I ever GM for was back in the old days with Robotech the Sentinels. So I have a lot of nostalgia and a lot of love for the sci-fi genre. Our setting is going to start out in the city of Telenar, and we have our hero whose name is Vector X. Vector X is a bit of a mysterious character. No one knows exactly how old he is. He was abandoned by his parents when he was quite young, 5 years old, we think. And he's lived his entire life with a group of people in Telenar called the Underfolk. It's kind of the backside, the dark side of the city of Telenar. These are people who have lived in the streets, who live in the shadows, who really focus a lot on things like pickpocketing, sneaking around, stealing. So he's very strong in these kind of skills, perception skills, illusion skills, all things that deal with deception and with hiding and sneaking around. So if you're used to games like Dungeons & Dragons, maybe something more like a rogue character. So that's going to be our starting character, Vector X. He lives in the city of Telenar in a small little house, a little corner apartment. And I'm going to give you some of the narrative background before I get started with my 15 minutes. But basically, that's all we really need to know now as we get rolling. I should mention also that I'm going to be playing this game in the Cipher system, and this is the first time I've ever used the Cipher system, so I'm a complete newbie at this. I will make a ton of mistakes, and my take on the Cipher system will probably be rules light, so please do have some grace with me. But I also think this is kind of fun. I want to learn this system. I want to try it out, and this is a great chance to do it, and also to show us that when we do solo role-playing, we don't have to have a perfect understanding of rules. Just grab a system, grab some dice, grab some oracles, throw yourself into the game, and have fun with it. We're not here to impress anybody. We're not here to criticize anybody. We're just here to have fun and tell a great story. So please do have some grace with me. I will be making a lot of mistakes, I am sure. And to fill out the Cipher system, I will be using the Fate chart from the Game Master emulator. Most likely, I will also be using the meaning tables for actions and descriptions. So I'll be rolling some D100s here in addition to the D20, which is a standard for the Cipher system. I also have some cards here with some prompts on them if I need them, so I can help fill in some of the details as we play this game. Well, I think that is all the information that I need to give before we get started. So with that, let's go ahead and throw ourselves into episode 1, the kickoff episode of The Adventures of Vector X. A percussive blast echoes through the alleyway outside of Vector X's home. Quickly, his eyes shoot open, and he turns his head and looks out of the peephole that he had made that gives him a sight of the stairs leading up to his apartment. But there's nobody there. As the echoes fade, silence comes back to the alleyway. Vector X lies there, his heart beating, adrenaline running through his veins. After a few more minutes, he hears a subtle sound, the creaking sound of the lid of his mail drop box on his door lifting up. And he also hears the sound of paper sliding through the door and slowly drifting to the floor. Vector X slowly rises out of his bed, cautiously walks over to the door, looking out the people in the door. Once again, he sees nobody. But there at his feet is a letter. A letter with a stamp on it that he recognizes. A stamp that comes from the university. And immediately his mind goes to Professor Drahlden. Professor Drahlden, who is the man who has contacted Vector X 2 weeks ago, in fact, to try to involve him in their next mission. Vector X reaches down, grabs the letter, pulls it open, and there he sees a note which has hastily been scratched onto some paper. At the bottom of the note, a curious blotch of blood. He begins to read. VX, I write you in haste with urgency. The expedition has run into an unexpected challenge. I fear the worst. Meet me tonight at midnight in the reading room of the Telenar library. Come alone and speak to no one. Vector X takes the letter from Professor Drahlden. He folds it up and puts it into his breast pocket. He's spooked. He doesn't usually get spooked so easily, but this is something different. These expeditions are usually very routine. There's a bunch of crazy people that get an idea to go out and explore something. They're very routine. They go out, explore, they never find anything. They come home empty-handed, and they've lost a ton of money in the expeditions. Why this is different? Why the tone in Professor Drahlden's letter? Vector X doesn't really know or understand. It sets him into a mood of unease. Quickly, he gathers his supplies, his belongings together, his bag of light tools, his light armor jerkin he puts around his chest. He grabs his daggers and heads to the back of his apartment. He doesn't trust the front door. He opens up a window in the back and slips into the evening. When he gets into the alleyway of Telenar outside of his apartment, he looks around and it seems like it is rather empty here. But let's ask the question, does he notice anything in particular when he jumps out? Let's go 50-50 here. 38. Yes, he does. He looks into the direction of the library where Professor Drahlden is apparently sitting and waiting for him. And he notices above the library something of a flashing light of something that seems to be hovering above the library. The question now is is he able to perceive what this is? Let's go ahead and take a task roll here. And we'll say this is a difficult task to see what it is that is up in the air. It's dark out, and the light is kind of blinking in a strange fashion. We'll make it a difficult task, but he does have a bionic eye, so his bionic eye is able to sort of narrow in on this, and it's able to differentiate the light and the dark in a way that a human eye can't. So we'll give him an asset, which will drop it down to demanding, and he's also trained in perception, so that will drop us down to a 6+. Can he perceive what is up there? Okay, no problem. A 16. He sees that it is some kind of ship. Now the question we have here is it the ship for the mission, or is it something else? So the question, is it the ship for the mission? Let's say it's likely. Let's go ahead and do likely on the fate chart. 67. So yes, it is the ship for the mission that is hovering up above the library. Vector X sees this, thinks it's rather curious because the mission wasn't supposed to leave until the next day, the next morning. So a bit odd that the ship is already here, hovering above the library. Vector X begins to make his way through the alleyways leading to the library. He doesn't follow the normal streets heading into the city center, but he cuts instead across the road, making his way through the alleyways, cutting through the housing districts where the underfolk live, trying to hold himself to the shadows. The question is he able to remain stealthy? Well, let's say on a normal task, this will be standard for him. With his ability, he can ease it down to a 3+. Yes. 16, he's able to slide through the shadows unseen. Crossing the next road, he comes into the section where the library is. And there before him, he sees the Telenar library rising up in the middle of a small central garden area, a courtyard. It has these round architecture features with columns sticking up, plants growing outside of the library structure, and on the top of it, he sees this glass dome, where he knows that the reading room is located. Up in the top in the glass dome, there are rows and rows of bookshelves that he sees up there, but the library seems rather dark at this point. He slides close to the library door and sees the normal entrance to the library, where usually you walk in and the library, there's a sensor that reads your eyes, so an optical sensor that opens the doors for you and then logs in that you have entered the building. Vector X is a bit spooked, so he doesn't want to go that normal way. He remains in the shadows and begins to walk around the building. The question is now, is he able to perceive a different way into the building? And I'm going to actually set this as extremely challenging. So we'll make that 15, a roll of 15. But once again, he has his bionic eye, and he has the ability, he has the task in perception. So this will drop us down to a 9+. 19. Okay. Yes. So he is definitely able to perceive a way into this library. And not only that, with a 19, there is a minor effect that happens. So we'll say this, as he's walking around the building looking for a different way to get in, he suddenly hears this burst of air as the air vents that are connected to the library suddenly let out an abnormal amount of air. And he sees that one of the air vents, actually the metal vent on it, flies off of the air vent and falls to the ground with this cling, 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 cling. He looks around to see if anyone is around him, and it's oddly quiet. So Vector X, with this minor effect of the air vent opening up, begins to climb up around the building along these columns and get into the air vent. And with that, he's able now to slide into what would be the entryway of the library. His eyes have not been scanned, so there's no record of him entering this building. He enters into the shadows of this entryway. There are different chairs, different bookshelves even down here, but it's strangely quiet. He begins to slowly make his way up the stairway. And here's a question at this point. Does he perceive anything going on here? I'm going to just treat this as a 50-50 on the fate chart. And that is a 100. So an extreme no. Oh, wait a minute. No, it is 100. Zero. Wait, help me out here. 0, 0, 0. That would be, how does this work? That would be 100. So extreme no. He doesn't see a thing. He doesn't hear a thing. Everything seems to be completely normal. So he begins to walk up the stairs ever so quietly, making his way up to the top of the library where this glass dome is. And eventually, he pushes through the doors leading into the reading room. Looking around, he sees off in the distance something of a glow globe, which is floating above one of the tables. A glow globe similar to what he possesses that illuminates things in the vicinity, the direct vicinity. He remains in the shadows and walks around. As he looks over by this glow globe, he sees, in fact, a person with his back to him. It looks to be Professor Drahlden. Now here's the question. Are things normal with Professor Drahlden? I'm going to say very unlikely. Okay, so that is an 18. It seems like things are normal with Professor Drahlden. Vector X is still a bit spooked and shaken by this, so he walks up very cautiously behind Professor Drahlden. He doesn't see anything else going on here. He doesn't see any other signs of strange things happening. And as he comes behind Professor Drahlden, he sees that in Professor Drahlden's left hand is something of a pouch that he is holding. And he sees that Professor Drahlden appears to be scribbling a note. Vector X comes behind him. Professor, he says to him. Professor lifts his head very slowly, turns around, and sees Vector X. And at this point, Vector X notices that the pupils of his eyes are not normal. They're extremely dilated. And Vector X takes a step back. Professor Drahlden takes a gasp of breath, grabs Vector X's hand, and puts the pouch into it. We don't have much time. They're onto us. We need to escape as quickly as possible, he says. He's breathing now, getting heavier and heavier. Vector X says, who are you talking about? Who is it? Who is it that is after us? We don't have time now. The ship is waiting. We need to get to the ship. And as soon as he says that, he lunges forward now, grabbing his chest. And you look down now, and you see that there is actually blood that is dripping out of his nose onto the paper that he has been writing. And Vector X looks at him, and he begins to look around, and immediately now he hears a creaking noise coming from behind one of the bookshelves. Vector X immediately jumps into the shadows as he sees what appears to be a mist of sorts coming out behind the bookshelf. A mist that is comprised of what looks to be small insects. Vector X hides himself behind the bookshelf. The question is now, is he able to hide himself in a way that these little insects will not perceive him? And I will say this is going to be difficult, but he has an ability to remain hidden. So a 16, yes. He remains hidden now, and he sees that these small insects begin to come around and swarm around the professor's head, and he immediately hears sounds. It sounds like metal rubbing up against each other. And he realizes that these are not normal insects, but they seem to be small machines. And immediately, as if in a flash, these small insects dive into the nostrils and the mouth of Professor Drahlden as he lets out what seems to be a muted scream, sitting upright at his desk. And he slumps over now onto the table. Blood begins to flow out of his nose, out of his mouth. And after a few seconds, the small insects, the small machines make their way out of the bloody nose and the bloody mouth and begin to float out and float back into the back of the library. Vector X, seeing this, is horrified. He's grabbing this pouch in his hand. He looks down, opens up the pouch to look at what's inside. And now I need to take a card here to see belongings. What could possibly be inside of this? Oh, I like this. Seeds. The pouch is full of small black seeds. Why Professor Drahlden has a pouch of seeds in his hand, why he's giving them to Vector X, he has no idea. But all Vector X knows is that he needs to get out of this building. He needs to get out of here as quickly as possible because he cannot stay here. Somebody is after them. These machines are after him. He does not want to stay in this room. So he begins now to sneak away, heading to the stairway that leads up to the top of the library, where the dome has something of a spiral staircase leading up to the top of the glass dome, and on top of the spiral staircase is something of an observation platform. He begins to make his way to the spiral staircase, and here's the question now: is he able to stealth his way up the spiral staircase with these metallic, machine-like insects flying around? And I'm going to roll a 14 on our same roll of a challenge of a 15. Yes, he's able to do it on a 12. So he's able to make his way up into this observation deck. And there, as soon as he gets out there, he looks out, and above him, he sees this light flashing. And down on the street now, he sees suddenly what appears to be guards in black outfits charging into the library door, coming in with what appears to be weapons, blasters of some sort. And immediately as they break into the door below, Vector X is hit by this light from above him, a flashing light that is flashing in some sort of Morse coded language. Lights are flashing on him, and he looks up and he sees what appears to be doors of a ship opening up as the guards crash into the library below him. And that is where we are going to end this first kickoff episode of the Adventures of Vector X. And now I will send this off to the next player. Good luck.